Now, when it comes to make economic comparison, when it comes to make income comparison between countries, a very important issue is you need to consider that different countries' cost of living is very different. So we normally say, oh, this country is very expensive and that country is very cheap. So this is the concept of cost of living. Okay? So in this context, if we want to measure GDP, at the same time also consider the cost of living of the country, we are actually talking about we are measuring GDP measured in purchasing power parity. This is to calculate GDP. At the same time, we're taking into account the different cost of living of various countries. And this is very important in making international comparison. Let me give you this example to explain what the difference between GDP and GDP measured in purchasing power parity. Think about this. With $1, what you can buy in the US, $1. With $1 in the US, you probably can buy one pack of chewing gum. That's probably the most you can buy, or probably just one copy of New York Times. That's probably $1. Actually, $1 25 cents. That is a copy. That is the cost of one copy of New York Times. So you don't buy much. But how much you can buy with $1 in India? Well, to tell you the truth, with $1 in Indian, you can buy a three-course meal. Also, buy one pack of chewing gum. So you can see that $1 can buy a lot more in Indian than in the US. So if you take the three-course meal and one pack of chewing gum from Indian, take them back to the US, convert to how much these would cost, that the cost would be GDP measured in purchasing power parity. It actually measures how much actual product you can buy. So this is a more objective way to measure the income of the country. So in India, people do not make a whole lot of income in terms of dollars, but the product they can enjoy is not much less than in the US. So that really tells you that when we come to measure the actual income levels, we need to think about with that money how much product you can actually purchase. You may make a lot of dollars, but if you cannot buy a lot of stuff with dollars, that income does not mean much. And on the other hand, some other people do not make a whole lot of dollars, but with their limited dollars, if they can buy a lot of tangible product and their actual income is not low. And that is why we need to calculate with your income how much actual product you can buy, you can purchase, you can enjoy. And that's why we need to measure GDP measured in purchasing power parity. And that's important. Okay. Similarly, we can also calculate the GNA measured in purchasing power parity, or GNI measured in purchasing power parity. At the same time, we can also calculate GNP, PPP per capita. Of course, all these different measures of income, GNI, GNP, or GDP, PPP, GNP, PPP, GNI, PPP, they suffered similar problems as we see in GDP and per capita GDP. A lot of income, a lot of economic activities are not accounted for by the national economic statistics, so they are performed, but they did not go into the total aggregate of countries' GNI, or also the per capita GNI per capita GDP, PPP does not really show that is actual amount of income that everyone in the country actually makes. So these are all the problems that we use those income measure to measure the level of development. Now, to show how the GDP, PPP make a difference, one can to measure per capita income level of different countries. Let's take a look at this map. This map is GDP per capita for 2012. This is what we call nominal GDP. It does not consider different countries' cost of living. Let's focus on Indian on this map. On this map, India is in this income bracket. This income bracket is between 500 to 2,500, so not very high, not very high. Okay. So in terms of actual dollar amount in India, it's just per person just in this level between 500 to 2,500 categories. Now let's look at if we measure GDP per capita PPP. So we not only look at the dollar amount, we actually look at with the dollar you have, how much tangible product you can purchase. Indian is no longer in 500 to 2,500 categories anymore. It become higher. It become in a category of, look like in a category of 2,500 to 10,000 income dollar category. It's much higher. It's much higher. So that's you really tell us that you only look at the nominal GDP. It doesn't really tell the actual income level in terms of what you can, how much you can buy. But you have to look at GDP, PPP to get a real sense of with amount of a dollar, how much actual product you can purchase. So especially when you make a cross-country comparison, you need to convert that into GDP, PPP to get a real sense of income level. Now, this is a map that is produced by using data from World Bank. We mentioned before that World Bank today still use income level that are based upon national gross national income and gross national GNP. So gross national income is measured that very close to GNP, and this is a map that we use World Bank national gross national income to divide countries into 4 categories, and so the point of this map is to show that there are still the international economic institutions that use GNP as a measure of income. Now, recent decades, people have talked about the competition between the U.S. and China as economic superpower. On this slide, we can really see that China already catch up to the U.S. as the largest economy in the world in terms of GDP, PPP. Okay, so that's an event that many Western politicians and economic political commentators feel that the economic dominance of the U.S. was somehow threatened by China. But when you look at the income at per capita level, you can really see that China is way lower than the per capita income than the U.S. in per capita income. So China is still a middle-level income country, and the U.S. is a high-income country. So China still have a long way to go in order to catch up the U.S. in terms of per capita income. Of course, the aggregate, the size, big size of China already bigger than the U.S. in terms of GDP, PPP. But in terms of standard of living, China's economic level of development still far behind that of the United States. This is a slide that give us a sense of several major countries in terms of the GDP, PPP, at per capita level, and this gross national income, again, at per capita level. At the same time, we look at the income distribution. You realize that some countries have more income inequality than others. Brazil has very high income inequality, and same as Nigeria. Like some Latin American countries and some sub-Saharan African countries tend to have more income inequality than many other countries in the world. U.S. also has relatively high income inequality. Okay, the poorest uh, the poorest 20% of the population in the country earn only 3% of income, compared with those richest 20% people who own 51% of the country's total income. So it's a very large income inequality. And so the point of this slide is to show that just look at income, average income level itself does not reveal the whole story. You also need to look at income distribution that is reflected in the economic inequality between the poorest and the richest of a country. So we can get a more balanced view, more complete view of the level of development of different countries.